And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
There was a lot of great games that came out in 2008, but my favorite of the bunch is Le Havre. Le Havre is designed by Uwe Rosenberg, who is best known for Bonanza and Agricola. But this game is just fantastically fun. I found myself playing it time and time again. And since it's an in-depth game, let's get right and look at the board. Now you can see on this board here that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different pieces, a lot of different resources. You can tell on the different spots here, there's different resources. For example, here there's the fish, and then we have wood, and then we have clay, and iron, and grain, and cattle, and there's hides. And up at the top here, we see different buildings that players can be built. Over here is the town, where some buildings already are built. And then these are starting buildings that players have, piles of money. And man, there's just a whole lot of pieces involved in this game. But it all basically takes place right here. Each player gets to start a round, and depending on how many players there are, the game is set up slightly differently, but it works thusly. On a player's turn, they move their ship to the next empty spot. They turn that over, and they look at the two resources that are indicated on that spot. In this instance, it's iron and a coin. So a coin is placed on the offer down here, which brings it up to 3 coins. And then we look over at the iron offer, and we place 1 iron on that. Now, the blue player, whose ship is on the token over here, and it's still his turn, has a couple choices. He can either take one of these offers, so he could take 3 francs, 2 fish, 2 wood, 1 clay, 1 iron, there's no grain or cattle right now, or he can take his person and place him in one of the available buildings at the top. So as you can see, as the game progresses, you'll be turning over more of these tokens, and more goods are added to these different offers, and so they're going to become more and more tempting. Now, what good are all these goods? Well, that's basically the entire concept of the game. Fish are good for food. Wood is good for burning and providing fuel. Clay is great for building. Iron is tremendous for building. Grain and cattle are good for food. And so is coal, and hides are good for making money. And there's really a whole lot going on. Well, let's take a closer look at these pieces here. So I have here clay, wood, iron, grain, cattle, hides, coal. And so we have the different resources here. And you can see them. Let's take a closer look at them. Now, what makes this interesting, this game, is that each of these resources is a double resource. During the game, there'll be a chance to change wood to charcoal. There will be a chance to change fish to smoked fish. There'll be a chance to change clay to brick, and so on and so forth. And you notice there's some numbers on each of these. For example, on coal, you see that little, the little light bulb there, which shows that it produces 3 energy. But later on, when it's changed into coke, it produces 10 energy. You'll see cattle, which is really nothing much at all, but when you turn it over, it's worth 3 food. And so there's basically your standard resources and your upgraded resources. The game isn't all about just collecting resources, although that's a huge chunk of the game, just trying to get as many different resources as you can, but it's about building buildings. Each player has 1 person, represented by a disc, and on their turn, instead of taking a pile of resources, they can place this person in a building, and then take whatever action that building gives. Now in this instance, the building firm, the action is build a building. So you could place it here to build a building. Let's say, for example, the building I wanted to build was the bakehouse. I would look at the top here and note that it takes 2 clay to build the bakehouse. So if I had 2 clay, I could build the bakehouse. And now the bakehouse would be my building, which at the end of the game would be worth 8 points to me, or worth 8 coins. Now, whenever you use a building, let's go back to this build a building, there's a cost to using the building. Up here, it costs 1 food to use this building. And so you have to be mindful of the cost. If it's a building that another player owns, you pay that cost to them. If it's a building that the town owns, you simply pay it to the bank. And as you can see, these different buildings will give different benefits. The bakehouse here changes wheat to bread. But you have to pay energy, which means likely you'll have to burn some wood up or some charcoal or maybe even coal to change this grain into bread. But wood is only worth 1 food. Here you change it into bread, which is worth 2 food each, and you also get half a coin for every grain that you do this by. And so this is a really useful way to change grain into wood. And there's all kinds of buildings. We have buildings that change wood into charcoal and change fish into smoked fish. Buildings that simply give you a pile of clay. Buildings that change clay into brick. Buildings where you can basically sell wood and get money. And then one of the most important buildings in the game, the wharf, which allows you to build ships. So over the course of the game, a player will have a choice between 3 buildings. There are several buildings used in the game, but they're all shuffled and they come up randomly, and so they have the choice of the building at the top of the pile, and you can see the costs of any buildings that are coming up in the future. There's also a pile of special buildings that's right here. Now these buildings, there's a whole deck of special cards in the game, but only a few of them are used in each game, which provides a bit of variety over the course of a game. And so I like that, and I enjoy how that gives you different strategies that you can try over the course of different games. At the end of each round, players are going to look at this card right here. This card will tell you what happens that round, depending on how many players are playing in the game. Here it shows that you have to pay 2 food. Every player must pay 2 food. If they don't have the food, they have to pay money. If they don't have money, well, then they're going to be stuck taking out a loan card, which is worth negative points at the end of the game. After players have paid their food, sometimes the card will tell you to do other actions, like putting out a card on the table, or a harvest. If you have grain, you get more grain. If you have 2 cattle, you get more cattle. But then the card turns into a ship, which once people have the harbor, they can build ships, and these ships provide permanent food. They also allow you later on to ship goods for money at the end of the game, which can be a great way to get extra points. And as the game progresses, you'll see that the amount of food, 7 food per turn, 8 food per turn, 9 food per turn, increases. Also, the ships turn into iron ships, and then they turn into steel ships, and then they turn into luxury liners, which are worth quite a few points. When this pile is completely gone, then there's one final round. Players get one final action, and then whoever has the most points, plus however much all their buildings are worth, plus maybe some buildings give special bonus points. Whoever has most points at that point in time is the winner of the game. Le Havre is not a very complex game, at least with the way that it's taught. The rulebook has several pages, and I actually had to play through to figure out how it went, but it's very simple. You move your ship, you put out new goods, you either take a pile of goods or you use a building or build a building. So you can even buy buildings as an extra action. You can just pay up the money straight on the card and then get the action that's on the card for yourself. And so it has elements of other games, Agricola, Caylus, but it works together really well. If there is a disadvantage to the game, it's that it plays very slowly. Sometimes you have a lot of different choices, and so if you have 4 or more players, the game's a little too slow. I found that it's really great with 2 or 3 players, and incredibly fun. But what I really like about Le Havre is that on your turn you have a lot of choices, and it's kind of like, oh, what choice should I take? But the thing is, your choices are all really good. It's not like you're sitting there going, oh, I don't know what to do next. I have to make a bad choice or a worse choice. No, here you have good, 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 and better. There's so many different things. You can bake bread. You can take meat, slaughter them, take cattle, slaughter them for meat. You can decide to go for the shipping. You can build as many buildings as you possibly can. You can try to get money from wood. And it's with the special buildings and the different things that are at it, it's just an incredibly fun game. It has a higher level of complexity, but I've played it with several people who aren't real fans of big, complex games, and because it's simple, one step at a time, they understood it. They didn't do very well their first game because they didn't understand all the strategies, but they were able to understand it. The theme works really well, and I think this is an underrated game. It's not going to win many gaming awards of 2008, but in my opinion, best game, hands down. Try and find it.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.